more of a short message.
Yeah, I think it's called Thinking Unthinkable, Eddie. I've been one way or another involved in policy making for about 18 years, and throughout that time have been keenly promoting the cause of localism. But I think it is worth us, to varying degrees of effect, it has to be said, but I think it is worth us, before we plough into this discussion, just really focusing on why it is a good idea. Because if you just accept it, or we should do more local stuff, it becomes a bit more, sort of motherhood and apple pie. Well, let's just add a little bit of local to that because it sounds nice. But it's not really a theory of change. It's not an actual way of organising your intellectual framework to do stuff and be confident that when things get difficult, you don't just revert to centralism. So I was trying to think about it, and I thought about it basically under kind of 4 headings. Right? The first is, why be localist? Because it's practical. There is definitely a conceit, and has been in government for, well, at least since the post-war period, but probably before, that the man in Whitehall really does know best. The philosopher Bentham thought that because he could understand the human reason and how it worked, it would be possible for him to run India from his study. Now, we actually know enough about knowledge and humans and how they work to know that that is, of course, complete nonsense. Inevitably, there are things that you need to run centrally. Quite important to have a single foreign policy, for example, rather than one for every county. That would be confusing. But actually, context matters. And while human needs tend to be similar, how they express themselves in any individual location are obviously different. Just think of your own community, whether it's your hometown or where you live now, and think of the contrast between all those different places. Those needs, the deeper needs, are the same, but how they express themselves, whether it's local jobs, local schools, the hospital, whatever it is, will be different. So very practically, it is not possible to do what government is about, which is people voluntarily coming together to solve common problems, unless you are as close to the problem as possible. The second reason, justification, in my view, is an economic justification. And that's in 2 senses, both in terms of efficiency and in terms of spreading economic benefits. The efficiency argument flows from the practical argument, which is it is best to be closest to a problem if you're going to solve it. I think it's also true if you look at local government at every level upwards and compare it in efficiency to central government, that it actually performs very well, particularly after, not that it's been welcomed at local government levels, but the big squeeze over the last few years. They've become radically more efficient at doing what they do and stand, I think, in favourable contrast to what goes on in many Whitehall departments. But the more powerful reason, in my view, economic reason for doing so, is because of the huge disparities in wealth that exist across the country. There's new data came out at the end of last week which showed how many people in different parts of the country were living in the lowest decile of income and wealth. Those places used to be in our cities. They used to be places like Tower Hamlets in London, for example. But they are no longer. These are actually some of the best off communities now. But that poverty hasn't gone away. It has spread into new and different corners. All those forgotten towns and communities, a lot of which voted to leave the European Union. So there is a connection between the sort of dominant policy issue that we have today, but actually what the feeling is at a local level. And we have a core mission, I believe, as Conservatives, to level up, as Neil was talking about, as the Prime Minister has talked about. And that means going into each and every one of those places and understanding what it would take to make it economically successful. And as that kind of hints, frankly, it's also where the politics is. So if you look at the most recent elections this year, our towns were the most politically volatile part of the country. That is where the voter churn is happening, and its ability to win town seats, like Eddie did at the last election, which is going to determine whether or not we are capable of having a majority at the next general election. So frankly, we need politically to get to know and understand each and every place so that we can have an offer for it that is relevant to the people who are living in those communities. And it is worth saying at this point that a project that myself and Will Tanner are doing with Onward, called The Politics of Belonging, is actually asking what people are looking for. And interestingly, they are looking for, from government at any rate, a much greater sense of security, of being looked after. And so it is not simply a case, as the headings of this talk suggest, about setting places free. Actually, moving away, doing less from the government is not always the right thing. It is about making sure there's capacities and capabilities in those communities for them to thrive. And I think we have great examples historically. Think of the Liverpool in the 80s, the Docklands, think of, you mentioned Ben Houghton in Teesside, think of Andy Street in the West Midlands. We know that Conservatives at that level produce better results with lower taxes. and that is something we should always focus on. And then the final thing is I actually think there is a moral dimension. It's the right thing to do. We believe, I think, as Conservatives, in the idea of subsidiarity, the idea that power and agency, giving people more control over their lives, is the right thing for politics to do that. In fact, that's one of the reasons many of us don't like the European Union, because it doesn't do that. But if you apply that same logic, you should be cascading power all the way down as far as it can possibly go. And 9 years ago, we had a sort of schema that Greg Clark developed about decentralisation and how you should cascade power. I think we've lost a bit of that. We've got all governments, unfortunately, over time, to some degree, become the political wing of the Treasury. It's inevitable. The Treasury is the most centralising institution in this country. But we have to regain that belief in giving power down to people, whether that's individuals, families, neighbours, communities, towns, cities, or whatever it is. And I think if we can do that, then we will be able to contrast a really radical set of changes that will benefit people in each of their communities. Not just saying you have to leave in order to succeed, but to re-energise those communities that stands in stark contrast to what was revealed by the Labour Party at the end of last week, which not only is the hardest left policy framework we've seen in this country since 1983, but is about the aggregation of power to the centre. And that is profoundly dangerous, and it will not do the thing that we are focused on discussing here, which is to rejuvenate each and every one of those communities that's been left behind in the last 30 years. Thank you.